I'm your host, Lauren, and together let's explore what it really means to embrace authenticity in a world that often values conformity. If you've ever felt the pull to challenge the status quo or deepen your connection to self, you're in the right place. Welcome back to another episode of Not So Status Quo. Today's topic has been on my mind for a couple of weeks now, so I am very keen to jump in and explore it with you. And actually, I had asked on my Instagram stories for your vote on which topic you would like to discuss. And the highest percentage of votes happened to go to this topic, which made me really happy. And the topic is life redirections and tests. Now, this topic came up quite a fair bit in the episode with Henny from last week. If you have not listened to that one, I strongly encourage you to have a listen. We both received a lot of positive feedback about that episode. She dropped a lot of gold. So do yourself a favor and listen to that episode with Henny. So I personally have had an abundance of both life redirections and tests. And let me tell you, I look at both of them in such a different way now compared to when I was younger. In my early 20s, I would often see them as a negative thing. And to be frank, on occasion, I would often feel like I had failed. Or that I must have been out of touch with my intuition, that I'd done something wrong. I have always put a lot of pressure on myself to do everything to the best of my ability, particularly when it comes to things I'm passionate about or really care about. My natural disposition is to be planned, intentional, and operate with a high level of attention to detail. And I would always check in with my intuition along the way. However, when things wouldn't go to the general plan, I would feel like I really did something wrong along the way. Once I started loosening my grip and allowing room to be delighted by life, surrendering the idea that I knew best more than God or the universe or whoever you believe in, my mindset around life redirections shifted in the best possible way. Today, we'll focus more on life redirections than tests, though, because tests will need a whole episode dedicated to it. And there's some really cool things that we can explore there. But when we do talk about life redirections, I like to think of it as a shift from your expected path. Perhaps you had a clear plan or a vision for your life, but something disrupted it. And that might have been in your control or outside of your control. It could be things like career changes, relationships ending, some type of relocation, or a personal transformation. What's interesting is that redirections can often come after a setback or a challenge. From my personal experience, this is often the case. So, for example, after some kind of rejection, or if you've experienced burnout, or if you're feeling really stuck or unfulfilled. They can also be sudden or gradual. So, for example, redirections that might be really dramatic could be things like losing a job or an unexpected relationship breakup, whereas others might unfold slowly. Maybe you've outgrown a phase of your life and you're being pulled in a different new direction. Before diving in further, though, I want to emphasize that we all have moments where things fall apart. But what if that's actually happening for us instead of to us? So let's start discussing why we struggle with change, why we struggle with these life redirections. Now, it often comes down to our expectations versus reality. We often create these really rigid expectations for our lives. We hold on really tightly and we like to predetermine the outcome and think that we always know best. And this often comes from a fear of the unknown. I've seen this in myself, I've seen this in the people around me, and I've seen this very commonly with a lot of the clients that I work with. This fear of the unknown is actually a normal thing. Uncertainty often feels uncomfortable, and this is normal. I've spoken about this before. Our brain likes predictable and familiar. And when there is something that falls outside of that, when it is a little unknown, that can feel really uncomfortable. It can raise question marks in our mind. We start second guessing. We might feel a bit overwhelmed. We might feel a little bit anxious. And that's our brain's way of making us sit down and reassess whether we actually want to jump into the unknown thing, or maybe we would prefer to stay in the familiar, the comfort of the familiar, even if that's not necessarily the best thing for us. But stepping out of our comfort zones into uncomfortable territory is actually often necessary for growth. So letting go of control and understanding that life is unpredictable by nature and that we cannot hold on and predict everything and force everything to happen the way that we would like it to, because this creates a lot of resistance around change. This isn't a great situation to put ourselves in all the time because it just really makes change and life redirections so much harder than it needs to be. Like we discussed in the episode around signs you have outgrown your current reality, when a path keeps feeling hard or misaligned or forced, it may be a sign you're actually meant to be pivoting, that you have outgrown your current reality and change is required. This is actually life pushing you towards something better. So don't be surprised when your redirections often align with your personal growth and evolving desires. Whether you realize that in the moment or not, that's another thing. So this leads me to a wonderful thing called hindsight. When we look back after a situation has happened, we often see that things worked out better than we could have expected. Even when situations are hard, heartbreaking, or confusing, it's a good time to remind yourself of how things have worked out for the best in the past, reminding our brain that in the moment, things have actually worked out really well in my favor in the past when I've experienced feelings like this. It can go a long way in reassuring yourself that it's not the end of the world, and perhaps it's time to embrace this redirection. Resisting redirection can cause unnecessary stress, but learning to embrace the unknown allows you to see all of the new possibilities that are available to you. It's time to not be pigeonholing ourselves or determining that this is a bad thing. Like I mentioned before, I have experienced quite a few life redirections, some by surprise and others that I anticipated. One that I anticipated but was still a bit of a surprise was a few years ago, I was actually made redundant from an executive role that I had. And my entire program that I had built brick by brick from the ground up got completely axed due to a variety of circumstances that the broader organization found themselves in. But the truth is, I needed to leave there a long time before this redundancy came. I held on to that financial security blanket like you would not believe, even though I was not happy. And in the lead up to finding out that I actually had been made redundant, I actually had a deep knowing that it was coming. Redundancy was a word that just constantly kept coming into my mind in the weeks in the lead up. I actually remember one morning in particular, I had these stiletto pumps, and the heels, like the end of the heel, was actually coming off, and the metal was like poking through. And I was like, oh man, if I get made redundant, I'm not going to have to fix or replace you. Like, I'm just going to get rid of you. And it was things like this, these little drop ins that I continuously kept having. So when the conversation was being had, it was being danced around a little bit, and I just asked straight up because I just had this intuition, these drop-ins, that was something that was going to happen. And the CEO who was delivering this news was very surprised that that was something that I already anticipated. But frankly, this needed to happen far earlier than when it did. I have said to a few people that if you don't make the change when you know that you need to, life has a way of forcing change. I knew in the moment, and I certainly know now, that that was one of the best things to happen to me. I probably wouldn't have started Status Aligned and this podcast in the timing that I did, and I probably would have put it off for more years to come. So it was a blessing, and it wasn't even in disguise. I knew that this was a blessing, but it was a redirection nonetheless, and a redirection towards something that I should have been doing far sooner. One of the biggest redirections that I've heard of is Steve Jobs. So in 1985, Steve Jobs was forced out of Apple, and that was the company that he actually co-founded. And from there, he started a new venture, Pixar, which we know to have become very massive and very successful. And he also started another company, which Apple actually later acquired, and that brought him back to the company. And when he returned, he transformed Apple into one of the most valuable companies in the world. And I often think that sometimes life puts us on these paths because we have lessons that need to be learnt. We have skills and little things that we need to acquire along the way in order for the next chapter to be even better or to even graduate to that next level. Now, dealing with redirections is often a mindset game. So shifting our mindset around redirections is going to be so transformational for you. I like to think of it as it's either this or something better. And if it's not this, then show me something better. And that shift in my perspective to believe that a closed door is actually leading to a far better one has helped me tremendously. It's also important to remind ourselves that it's not actually a failure, like a closing door or a redirection isn't a failure, it's actually an upgrade. So what feels like an ending is often a really powerful new beginning. And many successful, happy people credit major redirection as their turning point. A lot of my clients have experienced the exact same thing. So my best piece of advice when it comes to embracing and navigating a life redirection does come with a caveat and a little bit of added context, okay? So I like to see it as it's about releasing the shoulds so that you stop thinking about how life should be and you accept how it is. Now, the important caveat and the extra contextual information around this is I am not an advocate for people existing in their current reality that is not meant for them. Okay. So just because it is right now doesn't mean that you should be accepting it. It's quite the opposite. However, what I am saying is that when a redirection happens, instead of dwelling on it and stressing over it, it's better to just accept that this is what's happened, check in with our mindset, align our mindset, and keep moving forward. It's okay to have some emotions attached to this and to move through those emotions. Absolutely. However, dwelling and really getting ourselves down around these things, whilst it's hard in certain circumstances to just pick ourselves back up and keep going, your mindset will play a really big role here in how easily and how quickly you move forward and you embrace the new path. It can also be really helpful to reframe setbacks as a form of guidance. Now, hear me out. I really want to challenge you to start seeing challenges as signposts leading you in a better direction. Let me repeat that. See challenges as signposts that are actually leading you in a better direction. They're redirecting you from a path that is not meant for you. From here, focus on taking the next best step based on the information and the gut feeling that you have at the time. Now, I want to emphasize the second part of what I just said, based on the information and the gut feelings, the intuitions, the drop-ins that you have at the time. Why? Because sometimes we have a tendency to put so much unrequired attention and emphasis on making the right decision. I'm speaking to myself when I say this. We don't need to put that pressure on ourselves to get it right every time. It is okay for us to take small aligned steps forward. Oftentimes, it's the accumulation of small steps forward, not leaps and bounds, that are going to make the big difference. We really want to avoid getting into a place where we are stuck in an analysis paralysis and we're not actually moving forward at all. These are a few of the signs that I've personally experienced, and I've seen a lot of my clients experience as well. Now, again, go back to the episode and have a listen if you haven't already around signs that you're outgrowing your current reality, because this ties very, very neatly into that one. So to recap a few of the points, perhaps you are feeling stuck or uninspired in your current path. That's a pretty big one that I've experienced. Maybe doors keep closing no matter how hard you try, or maybe they're not opening no matter how hard you're pulling and trying to open those doors. Maybe you keep feeling called towards something new, even if it's terrifying and unknown and scary. Maybe opportunities are arising and you're really excited about them, but you know that change is going to be required. And maybe you're experiencing challenges that are forcing you to grow in a new way. They're forcing you to do things differently. You can't keep showing up in the same way that you're used to and the way that you feel comfortable. You need to do things in a new way. If you are going through or you're considering a life redirection, I really want to remind you that a redirection isn't a rejection or a failure that you've done something wrong. It's often an invitation to something much, much better. It's part of your path. It's that you're not meant to be continuing on the journey that you're in right now. And whether you made the decision or somebody else made the decision for you, viewing a redirection as something that's happening for you is the healthiest mindset to be in. I know when a life redirection happens and it's out of your control, it's not something that you've necessarily instigated or that you actually want, it can feel really disempowering. It can often spark feelings that you're not good enough, that you could have done better, that you're not worthy. These things are so far from reality and they're so far from the truth. And that really comes down to knowing yourself, trusting yourself, having self love, and really being in tune with who you are. But it's hard when things happen around you and it's something that you're really invested in, whether that's a relationship or a job or another situation that's kind of, you feel like it's just kind of fallen through your fingers. It can be really difficult to navigate that. Shifting and growing our mindset around life redirections is going to be one of the best things that you can do. And the time to start doing that is now. It will better prepare you for when life does take a twist or a turn, especially one that you're not anticipating. Now, I'm going to put some affirmations in the show notes below, specifically on the topic of redirection. So if you are going through a redirection or you feel like one is coming, definitely incorporate these into your daily practice. I often suggest to my clients when we do affirmation work to put it in a high visibility area. So oftentimes I'll encourage them to write it out on a piece of paper and stick it on their bathroom mirror. So when you're getting up and getting ready in the morning, maybe you're brushing your hair, brushing your teeth, doing your makeup, whatever, you can see the affirmation and you say it to yourself with conviction. It might be uncomfortable for you, but look at yourself in the eyes, like literally eyeball yourself and say this affirmation to yourself. You might not believe it to begin with, but if you say it to yourself with conviction, speak it into existence, you will soon believe it and you will shift your mindset. After this episode, if you have the time and space, I really encourage you to reflect on moments in your life where things didn't go to plan, but they worked out for the best. This is going to be really important to draw upon in those times where you do have a redirection that is somewhat out of your control or one that you've been putting off making, to really remind your brain that things like this have happened to you before and you have got through them, and not only just got through them, but everything's actually been in your favor. Everything has happened for you, not to you. Actually, let's go a step further. I would love to hear from you. So drop me a DM on Instagram, either status aligned or not so status quo, or leave me a comment on YouTube. And I want you to tell me when you've had a life redirection that actually turned out to be your biggest blessing. Whether you knew it in the moment or not, why was this the best thing that happened? I know life redirections can feel really scary, especially when they're not wanted. However, I know that you deserve the absolute very best that life has to offer. So if it is not your current circumstance that is for your highest good, then let it be something even better. Before ending today, one of my private clients has actually suggested a couple of times that I pull a self-care card for the greater podcast. Now, pulling a self-care card is something that I incorporate with the majority of my clients at the end of their sessions. So whether that's at the end of each session in the transformation programs or in our ongoing one-on-one work, I know this is something that a lot of them really value, especially because the messages that come up 99.9% of the time are highly, highly relevant to what we've been discussing or a theme that's going on in their life. I really loved this suggestion. And so I did pull a self-care card before I started recording today. I don't know if it's something that I'm going to do on an ongoing basis. I know that for some people, pulling a self-care card might not resonate with them, and that's totally fine. But if you like this, let me know. And if enough people say that this is something that they want to be an ongoing theme in the solo episodes, I will make it a repeat thing. So when I was shuffling, two cards actually flew out of the deck, which often happens. If you're watching the video recording of this episode, either on YouTube or on Spotify, you will be able to see these cards. However, if not, they are the Wisdom card and the Awareness card. These are so beautiful. And honestly, I mean, I'm not shocked at how relevant they are to the topic that we're discussing today. So the first one, the Wisdom card, it says, let go of the need to control. Trust in the wisdom of a divine plan. This is so relevant to what we are discussing. This is something that I need to remind myself of often, is to loosen that grip and allow myself to be delighted by life and guided by life. The second card is the Awareness card, and it says, practice present moment awareness. The meaning you yearn for lives in the ever present now. This is such a lovely card and a really good reminder if you're in a position right now where you're dwelling too much on the past or on the future, that maybe practicing some mindfulness, really tuning into your body, tuning into your intuition, centering yourself, grounding your nervous system, bringing that awareness to self and into the present moment could be really beneficial for you. So, these two cards are so lovely, so highly relevant. So, if you enjoyed this, let me know if you would like it to become a regular feature, and I will look to include it. Next week, I will be back with another guest episode. I have been pinching myself, honestly, with the incredible women that have agreed to be on Not So Status Quo. I'm feeling very, very fortunate and very energized by the conversations that I'm having. And I hope that you are too. I hope that you're loving them. If you are, I would really appreciate you liking, subscribing, commenting, and rating the show. It makes such a big difference, especially in these early stages of a podcast, and it will really help to get even more amazing guests on the show. All right, my friends, I will leave you with this. Your dream life might be waiting for you in your next detour or life plot twist, as I like to call them. So trust the process. You deserve it. And if you've got this far, thank you for sticking with me. I am recovering from pneumonia and there is an impending cyclone outside. But against all odds, we are here and we are having these conversations. We are moving. And I am so glad that you joined me for another episode of Not So Status Quo.